The return of Red Dwarf brought with it a lot of surprises, but perhaps the most startling was the crew's journey into a portal and right through the fourth wall.
Many people think a really good way to create good stories is to look at what's the worst possible thing that could happen to your character.
We're not real, what are we gonna do?
And I looked at it in a slightly different way. I looked at it from the point of view is what's the worst possible thing that could happen to my audience? And it seemed to me that the worst possible thing that could happen to my audience was somehow what they'd seen wasn't real.
How's this possible? We're characters from a TV series who've somehow escaped the TV world into the real world.
And if you look at metafiction, if you look at fourth wall stories, and they've been going since the 9th century, I think, with Arabian Nights and Pirandello, 6 characters in search of an author, and not just League of Gentlemen guys. Life didn't begin in 1990. So there's a whole genre out there, but very, very little has removed the fourth wall and then returned it at the end with no damage done.
There, I think that's pretty much put it in perspective, don't you, sirs?
When I first read the script, I was actually worried. I thought, oh God, we've gone back to Earth, and it's all gone a bit sort of weird, and it's all too, it's kind of lost its Red Dwarfness, until you get to the end and it spins off. You go, yes, this isn't real. I love that. Well, I'm just a bit thick, really. I mean, I should have worked it out before. A lot of Red Dwarf fans would have worked it out before we even go to Earth. But I had been duped.
Well, that twist at the end of the story is what really did it for me, because when I was reading it, I was thinking, where's he going with this? This is mad. No, I don't want it to end like this. No. You got me. You got me. You sucked me in and did me again, Naylor.
When I read that section of script, in the first draft, and they came back to Earth, my jaw hit the deck, because I was thinking, it can't happen.
He said, I've read that first script, absolutely serious face. I said, that's going to make a lot of people really angry, And I looked at him expecting him to laugh or twinkle, and he went, no, I'm serious. And so it had clearly made him angry, and he just completely bought the fact that, I think there's also a part of me thinking, no one's really going to buy the fact that I'm making them all fictitious characters, and I'm going to completely undermine the whole previous 52 shows and leave everyone completely bereft and furious. But hey, they did. A lot of people did.
Nowhere was the clash of fiction and reality more noticeable than in a local sci-fi shop, where the crew found more than one fan waiting for them.
It was my first day ADing, and it was very difficult having come out of a sort of secure studio, even though it had been very difficult shooting green screen for 4 days. It was our first day out on location.
The comic shop was something we discussed a lot right from the beginning. Again, it's quite a key scene. We talked about recreating it in the studio, and we'd looked at various options, and eventually we went out and did a recce, and we found somewhere called They Walk Amongst Us.
I have to say, I did fall in love with the name of the shop. I just thought it was such a perfect title, They Walk Among Us, for what they actually were doing.
We had problems with traffic, we had problems with members of the public who suddenly realised what was going on, and because our first shot was out on the street, it was very obvious that we had Red Dwarf main cast doing a piece in the shop. So there was a lot of people to control, a lot of wrangling was going on.
And suddenly I turn around there and there's 200 people on the other side of the road with camera phones taking pictures, and I go, where are they from? Who sent them? Are they meant to be in it?
And it's funny watching everybody watch it from the other side, and seeing my shop as an outsider completely, not being allowed in there, and hearing what people say about my shop. Some very nice things. I like that.
It's a very small space, so it's quite problematical in that sense.
And we're a crew of 50-odd people, so even on a minimal crew, Doug was stuck in the stock room, which was actually a bit like a broom cupboard. I was sitting on the floor, and the sound man was in the back room.
The shop was really small, so half the crew had to stand outside on the pavement. There was some restaurant we used that was halfway down the road for their toilet facilities, which was truly the most gruesome place ever to actually have to use.
I am playing Noddy. As far as I know, he doesn't have a surname, but Noddy is fine. A bit like Beyonce. Obviously, by his the clothes he's wearing, he's a huge, big Red Dwarf fan.
It just said in the script he was a roadie, and so we could have gone down the path of a sort of leather jacket headbanger, But actually, the fact he worked in the science fiction shot, it would seem much more appropriate that he would wear an iconic Red Dwarf t-shirt.
Listening to music? No. Why?
Jez absolutely nailed it. It was one of those great moments where we went in and they started to do just a run through, and then everyone started to laugh, and I got really sort of panic stricken because the laughs were so big and so long. I actually wrapped it up because sometimes in those situations it can never be funnier than that again, so it's sort of all the energy goes.
He was just brilliant. That was perfect pitch for that part. It was just perfect. He was, and with the t-shirt on as well, he was just, yes!
I mean, he just fell straight into the rhythm and the vibe of the acting that, you know, goes hand in hand with Red Dwarf.
And how are you playing it? Is there any voice? Is there any...
There is a voice, yeah, because it's not mine. The show is not mine. Had you seen it before? It's not mine. So, yeah, it is voiced character and in vision as well. I'm using my body and face and stuff. And I'm actually going imaginatively for a sort of northeastern accent, which is where I'm from.
One of those hit guest characters, I think. I think he'll go down as one of the classics.
Flesh and blood actors are one thing, but it was an artificial co-star that stole the limelight in the show's diving bell scenes, with the help of some all-too-real tentacles.
They were heavy. I thought they, you know, you usually think props are sort of made of plastic, and when they hit you, you knew it.
And how we've done that is we've just started off with clay, and then from that we've sculpted the detail into it, and then we've fiberglassed to make our mould. So we mix up a lot of silicone, we paint it in, let it dry, we clamp the mould together. We then put in a soft foam. We peel out the tentacle, which is then complete. From that stage, we then have to paint it. We eventually achieve layering colours and what have you, the look that we're after.
And there was also a lot of kind of just beating the cast to death with guys on the floor whacking tentacles. And then I looked at it and it just looked kind of plain in the fight, just looked a bit sad. And so I then went off and shot a load of the real tentacles on green screen, and then we added those in. And then Mike was going to go off and do 3 CGI tentacles coming up out of the exit hole.
During the Leviathan's attack, Rimmer was providing able voice support, including a few lines that were given a petrol-headed tweak by Chris Barry.
Get this. The four-wheel drive, the FF, identified by a 4-inch stretch in the wheelbase, had ABS in 1966. How mad is that?
Yeah, I just put my own sort of blurb, my own anarchism, if you like, into it. Hopefully he's not so upset about that.
Remember anything on the sonar? Did you know the Caterham 7 has titanium rear shocks that are completely originally designed and not based on anything at all? Listen to this. The valves, the camshafts are also titanium, and they're coated. This is unbelievable. That's different from the '68 model, the original Lotus. How cool is that? Better bullshit to come.
We haven't had too much time to really, you know, sort of joke around and stuff because it's been quite a tight schedule. So, you know, we haven't had the same amount of time where we can, you know, take the mickey out of each other.
I'd love to know any comedy show ever that's been shot without any rehearsal time. Well, no, I tell a lie. We had 2 hours. We did the read-through with the 4 guys and the crew guesting as the different characters, which is always horrific. Hearing your lines for the first time read by non-actors. So we had the read-through, and then it was hardly any time at all. And we rehearsed the sitting in the car scene, the car landing scene in Coronation Street, and that was it. That was the only rehearsal period you had. Now, back in the old days, we would have had 3-4 days rehearsal on set. You go through every scene, you work, you know, if anything didn't work, it would be, come back tomorrow, guys, we'll tweak it. So that was terrifying.
I would have loved to have been in front of a studio audience out there. It would have been played completely differently, of course. We were out there pumping up for laughs and things, but the writing is so good and so funny that sometimes you do yearn to be, just to hear the laughter and do it the way we did do the majority of the original series.
Then I think all our fear was that we might lose some of the kind of spontaneity of the thing, but actually, I don't think it does. Often by the time we're getting ready for the actual take, I've truly understand what the scene's about, and I've truly understood the line I'm saying, especially if they're kind of complicated Crichton lines. Effectively, it's like you shoot a film, so it's a completely different way. So we're often doing like maybe 10 seconds or 15 seconds of a scene in one bit, because then the camera will move and then there'll be another one. And then there's always the nice young man with the tape measure that comes out and measures your chin to see how far you are from the camera, which is like, ooh, I've had my chin measured again, you know.
Because the camera's right here and it's all up close and personal and it's all sort of close-ups and it's single camera stuff and it's not painted in such broad strokes. You really have to tailor your performance to that situation.
The actress who plays it, of course. She's alive in this dimension, isn't she?
And minimalism works. You can get over things with the look of the eyes or a raise of the eyebrow. You know, you don't have to sort of like do it like a stage play.
The decision to film without an audience, made for reasons both practical and creative, happened alongside Red Dwarf's first shoot with a new camera system, the appropriately named Red 1.
Right early on, Doug had said he was very keen to shoot on the Red camera, which is very new technology and a camera that's been much maligned. I was reluctant to use it to begin with because I'd heard bad stories, horror stories about it. But Doug was absolutely insistent on this, and I'm glad about that because it made me overcome my reluctance and open my mind to this camera, which it's bringing about its own small little revolution in the industry, and we are, pretty up near the front of that as well.
But what's lovely about them is they have the optical characteristics of a classic 35mm film camera. And what I mean by that is that we get these lovely filmic kind of framings with the background out of focus. It just adds a lot of production value.
So what it means is we've got loads and loads and loads of data. So what happens is those data is coming off the drives, those drives are loaded into this machine here, and then we have a massive fibre RAID here, which is probably one of the biggest hard drives you can get. This is 24 terabytes for those who are interested, and everything to do with the film is saved on here, and then it's then downsized using this machine here, and then sent to the editors down a network, so those editors can edit the footage as quick as possible.
Normally I start the day after a shoot starts, because you shoot for a day and the rushes get transferred overnight and I come in the next day and start. On this job I started the afternoon of the first day, because morning shoot got transferred down the wire, which from the set down through the window into my machine, and I could start editing almost immediately.
Which is really cool because it means that Doug has the ability to find out what's working and what's not working as quick as possible. So if anything needs reshooting or if he needs to do any pickups, he knows before we leave the sets or before those sets are taken apart.
It's shooting a very large frame, what's called 4K. What we mean by 4K is if you think of high definition and you double it horizontally and double it vertically, that's how big it is. So if PAL is this big and HD is this big, 4K is out here. You might say, why do I need 4K? Like, what's the advantage of having something that large? Well, sometimes we want to reposition things, literally creep in the shot, sort of frame something, and we've got a lot of extra space there, we can do it.
An example is the scene with Simon Gregson, when he's watching them at the post box. He arrived and he stood there for the whole scene while they did their acting. And in the story, he stands there for the duration of quite a lot of the scene. Then he does his little bit and walks off. And it was realised that this was an unnaturally long time for him to be standing there. So we recut it. The wide shots included him, so we had to reframe to get him out of them. And it worked very well.
When you're shooting really, really fast and you haven't got time for the coverage, as we often didn't, and because we've only got one or sometimes two cameras, having that as a technique's just invaluable.
But not every piece of equipment proved as reliable as the Red.
We've had a few lights explode on set. We've covered 3 of the cast in broken molten glass, which was a 5K exploding above the sleeping quarters.
But I was saved by a piece of filter paper. I don't know the technical name for it. But had it not been for that, I would have had some very hot shards of glass heading straight for my scalp. It really was a sort of, and then we just went, and split.
The actors managed to dive out of the way before the molten glass came through on their heads. So a little bit of unscripted stunts there.
Danger is something the Red Dwarf crew are more than used to, though legs did quiver as the team continued a series tradition, improvising a location from a studio gantry staircase.
I mean, it was, I don't know what it would be, 4 floors of an ordinary house, I suppose, but almost vertical steps going like that.
Yep, I can see it in the dim distance, actually. And it was a tricky little scene to do that because it was fairly fresh dialogue. Robert had, as usual, you know, with him, a pretty tricky speech to get out.
It was just the problem of my peripheral vision with, if you put your fingers there, you can't see where your feet are, basically, which is the equivalent of the Crichton mask. And so I didn't know where my feet were. So I was supposedly walking down, doing quite a complicated line, and my feet were going like this, because it was like that. It was steep. Everyone was going down the very steep ladder quite timidly, because there was a time when Craig would have just, I'll do all my own stunts, man, and just jumped. But even he was holding on with both hands.
What's that DVD case say again?
The crew are hurled through a portal where they discover they are just characters in a TV show.
And, what else does it say?
Steve.
At the end of a long day, and with the decoration and detail of the sleeping quarters still not perfected, the team moved on to the Carbug garage scene. A bonus for the strained schedule, the minimal lighting and lack of dressing meant the scene could be set up and shot in 15 minutes, and allowed Robert Llewellyn to quickly tug on his Crichton mask without requiring the usual arduous makeup.
Welcome to Optimist Productions. I'm sure the camera really loved that, Craig. Do you know anything about cameras? We're doing your own lighting now. Our own lighting productions.
In you come. Save your battery. You've got to walk from... Here we go, boys. And... set. And action. You can't be serious.
While Starbug was memorably recreated in the real world, the return of the Red Dwarf mothership herself remained strictly virtual, with Chris Veal's decade-old CGI model given a quick shipectomy.
So we had to now massage our ship to make it the short, squattier, funnier version. Now, you might argue, why did the ship change length? And all I can say to that is, when I asked that question, I was told, well, we're past Series 10 when we pick up the plot 9 years later, so watch Series 9 and 10 to learn how the ship got shorter.
I knew that the Red Dwarf fans preferred that squat version. They didn't like the pencil, and it was literally and we could do it.
In almost every episode, if you were to go through the DVDs, the ship travels from left to right. But in our one, it's back home, going home, and in mythology of filmmaking, that means you go from right to left. And so we had to suddenly turn the ship around and see it from the other side.
It wasn't built to get in close. We couldn't afford to get in close. In the best of all possible worlds, we would have had a miniature, you know, for those close shots, but we just didn't have the time or the money. It actually fits with the story to have a small Red Dwarf, the loneliness of that.
Also returning to his previous form was Dave Lister, whose iconic early costume was dragged out of the archive.
So this is the original Lister jacket from Series 3. When we did the camera test on high definition, it actually looked so much better, more decrepit.
I was just so glad that I could actually fit in to a costume that I wore in 1992. And it's now 2009 and it still fits, so that was quite heartwarming, really.
We did a camera test on Rimmer, and because we're on high definition, we looked at the effect of the quilting of the jacket, and it didn't quite sort of work as well. It actually sort of made him look bigger than he was. And so we looked back to the original, the tunic style, and it just gave him a longer line and more of a sort of slightly militaristic sort of look.
It's a more comfortable costume than before, and I'm glad to see the very old badge is still there.
We weren't going to use it, and I think it was on the day we suddenly, it just missed something, so we sort of resurrected it and put it back on.
Well, just before the badge, they did try and put a corporate name tag type badge on me. Didn't work, looked like a checkout person from a supermarket.
We had a name badge, it was on his beige uniform, the officer's uniform. It just didn't have the same feel as that?
This is synthetic taffeta, and it's sort of quite tailored to make me look quite scary. So it's got shoulder stuff and sort of, and yeah, so it's quite scary and quite formidable. I think it's excellent.
The cat, we kept his fur, which we used in the first scene, with his famous PVC and the cat belt.
He does get dishevelled a lot in this trilogy. Wet hair all over the place, not the kind of way he likes to be seen.
In fact, it was quite difficult to show that coat was as wet as it was. I mean, he was fairly saturated, but the PVC suit, it just sort of sponged off. And then the final outfit that we had was, we based on the Riviera Kid. It's something as a, you know, Danny was a trained dancer. He has that sort of physique that sort of can carry this off.
I lost all my dignity so long ago, I can't remember. This is the nice bit because it's nice and warm.
Yeah. Yeah, that'd be good.
Just put one more of these on.
The essential ingredients of makeup are the same, very similar, it looks the same, but the glue is a modified version. It's quicker to put on, so that the time that I have to be in makeup is now down to an hour 45, hour 30. I think we've done one in an hour 30 last week, which is really fast. If you consider the first time I ever did it, it was 6 hours, so it's a lot quicker. It's a lot quicker.
We had the Crichton suit from Series 8, and we camera tested it, and it looked tired. That was the reason why we thought we'd do a new Crichton. I mean, it's always with him is to try and give him the maximum flexibility, to make it as light as possible, to give him the freedom of movement, because he gets asked to do more and more things. So he didn't get to wear too many outfits, which was good. Oh, except he did wear a disguise with his Mac and coat, which was fine.
I like those. I'd love some glasses like that in real life.
Yeah. These have got proper lenses, so just be...
Oh, I can see! Jesus, they work! You'd walk past him and you'd never know he was a mechanoid. If you were even more short-sighted than me. No, I love that. I've seen lots of pictures of that costume. It is very funny, very, very amusing. Those glasses are just ridiculous.
Crichton's incognito look was revealed as the crew waited for a specially hired bus on the Shepperton lot.
This is our way of telling people, without actually telling people, that they've been in a documentary.
Also boarding as hastily grabbed extras were one of Back to Earth's producers, Helen Norman, as well as one of its executive producers.
Charles Armitage was there, looking very convincing as he queued for a bus and got on first.
He pays his fare and walks out of shot. He was very good. But Helen had been doing knitting in the bus stop, and she was worried, should she carry on knitting when she got on? Don't worry about your knitting, love, you're all right.
There's work out there for her, should she ever require it.
Shooting on a bus is really difficult because the bus jiggles you around, so the camera's rocking about all over the place.
Yeah, it's actually quite a nice way of doing it because the backgrounds are real. And if anyone watching it who is a bit techie might think, oh, they've done that in the studio and put a green screen background on, which is not normally what you do. We actually did it for real.
Sorry, do you want to go?
Yes, I
go back.
It's going to be quite exciting, I think. Just like seeing them for real, actually for real, not just on the TV. And it's really cool. I've watched a few episodes of it.
You're going to be, famous after this, you do realise.
Yeah, I know.
Tell me when you're ready, Andy. Ready? Okay, action.
You're Dave Lister, aren't you?
The two kids, in terms of the acting, it was sort of funny how professional they were. They knew the lines, they did them almost identical every time, and they were just like a couple of little pros. It was just extraordinary.
Lister learns that his lost love lives on in this reality in the form of actress Chloe Annette, who returned early to Shepperton to pose for a mock magazine shoot with a borrowed family.
It was Howard Burton's, the wardrobe designers, two children, a little boy and a little girl, to have the photographs with them. I think they were a bit unsure about who this strange lady who was a bit gushy was. So I'm so used to being with my own children who are very obviously know who I am. So this complete two kids I haven't met before, but it was lovely, they're sweet.
Far less wholesome was the subsequent scene in which Rimmer finally dispatched his hologram nemesis.
Well, you know, all this technology, all this, you know, highfalutin, beam me up, beam me back, bits and bobs, you know, forget about that. Just push them out in front of the bus. The old ones are the best.
So we had to do it outside in the street, and I had to act like that was happening. That's quite an ask. Just standing there and imagining an immense double-decker is breaking your back in 3. That was interesting.
Very brutal, very typical of Rimmer. You know, Crichton wasn't even shocked. He's just a brutal hologram murderer.
Yeah, I'm sorry. You know, there's only room for one of us here, love. And, you know, I'm afraid the Rimsey stage, bang.
Sophie Wilkeman, she's brilliant. She's fantastic at accents.
It seems to be a skill of mine that I can do accents, but it is a useless skill because if someone wants an Aussie, they will get an Aussie accent. If someone wants a Scouser, they'll go and get one. They won't think, let's get Sophie Wilkeman on board. We have tentacle of dimension migrating Leviathan. We take, insert into a gene reader. You have several in Medilab, and triangulate results with power surge readings and temporal displacement residues recorded in water tank. It took me hours and hours to memorize that one. I would do it in the bath, I would do it by my sink, I would do it on the bus, I would make people in sort of Sainsbury's test me. It was evil. Awful. It was brilliant. I really got into the world. I believed all those buttons I was pressing. I believed all those knobs and things that I was turning and all the sort of switches I was flicking. I believed they would do something very important.
In one swift move, Katerina had hurled the Red Dwarf characters out of their sci-fi world and brought them for a bumpy landing in a department store in Kingston upon Thames.
First of all, you've got the problem of we want to shoot in a store, and the store obviously won't let you shoot there during the day, so you have to shoot there when they're closed.
It's quite weird walking around a shopping centre late at night, especially for a Scouser. No store detectives or anything. It was like, you know, I think they had the CCTV off. Anyway, got myself a great sat-nav. Shh, keep it quiet.
We're just, you know, working out what telly to get on the dolly. For the
yeah, exactly. What's going to be the best monitor?
At least with the dolly, you can get out silently and quickly.
Most places wouldn't let us shoot. We went to about 10 places. No, can't shoot. Not interested. Blah blah. It was only when Joe took the decision to actually get a location manager who was, you know, knew the different stores, and in fact Primeval had already shot there, so there was a precedent. And the people there just could not have been nicer or more helpful. They were just so great.
Originally, I think we were going to do something in breakaway glass, but they wanted kind of the comedy shape, you know, when someone falls through something. However, glass obviously won't give you, breakaway glass won't give you that shape when someone falls through it, it will just literally break away. So, we've gone for a price cracking.
It was weird filming, crashing through the TVs, and I land on this wooden table and smash it in half, and Rimmer comes through a poster, and Crichton zooms along on the floor, and I was watching that get filmed.
3, 2, 1.
That was quite fiddly because there was a story going on in the television shop. Things are happening on the televisions, which is our story, as well as happening full frame for us to watch. So it was trying to work out what the public was seeing as part of a programme, or a promo as it was. It took a lot of mind manipulation in our own heads just to work out what was going on. And you know, for instance, the bit at the end where they're watching the salesman on the telly and he's watching them in the background. You know, you can throws the mind.
How did I get involved? I'd done some comedy recently on BBC, on BBC 3, and I know Doug from a long time ago, and I sent him this comedy that I did to get his opinion on it, because it was all sort of pilot stuff and some other bits and pieces, and he was really nice about it all, and said, oh, this might, you know, there might be some stuff coming up in Red Dwarf, and it sort of kept me in mind, so it's thrilling, you know.
We're trying to buy a very, very large television.
No, you are trying to buy a very large television, and I want a very small television.
The Red Dwarf character are using it as a portal to come back to Earth. And not looking a day older than they did in Series 8.
They look exactly the same, which I don't trust at all. Because when's it been going since? 1986?
88 was the first one.
88, which means the youngest of them's got to be at least 70. So I don't buy it.
We needed some extra bits for the B passing, so we got them to chat about HDs and Japanese TV sets and all that. It was quite a long bit that they improvised, and we used the start of it.
Well, is it HD ready?
It's a version of HD ready, yeah.
Plasma?
Yeah, it's a version of Plasma, smaller.
Surround sound?
If you've got very tiny ears and eyes, then yeah.
Do they do this at a 50-inch?
We do a version of it, 50-inch. It's made by a different company. It looks different. It's a different price.
Where is it made?
China, by way of Japan.
Well, which is it?
Both. It's a version of the 50-inch one you looked at before.
Classic situation. A man wants a big one, a woman would like big one, we'll have to settle for small one.
Television, that is.
With only 2 location visits of a few hours each, one scene was sadly dropped halfway into filming, as Dave Lister gets his first taste of a populated Earth in years. After which, it was back to the studio.
We are filming a scene where I talk about early 20th century toilet habits, and we do it in a department store, in a room that is very much sort of, like a bunk room, like one of the first bunk rooms. There's a couple of bunk beds there, and there's lots of things like toys and stuff like that which represent things that are in the original bunk room.
It's quite deliberately designed so that it mimics the sleeping quarters on the ship, but obviously they're unaware of that. So we've got the bunks, we've got entrances in the same places, a small table and some chairs. The computer in the corner is just like a little nod towards Holly. And if you look around at the little bits of dressing, we just make little allusion to some of the stuff we've got in the full-size set. Drum kit, guitar, motorbike, and just a little nod to the fact that they're all from space. And actually, if you look at the pictures in the frames, they're exactly the same images that Lister has plastered up on his bedroom wall.
The sleeping quarters are the heart and soul of Red Dwarf, and they have been really since Series 1. I think it's just very clever to sort of, revisit our bunk room, via this superstore kind of bunk room.
18 months into deep space, and I had the crew's only jammy dodger.
And you actually ate it? Some biscuit that had been jammed down the back of a sofa for God knows how long, you ate it?
No, I gave it to you.
It got cut down. There was a whole jammy dodger bit in one of the deleted scenes, and that was simply because originally it was going to be the start of show 2. And then when it wasn't the start of show 2, it just was like, why are you having this quite long dialogue sequence when we want to be getting on with the adventure? And so when we put it all together, the Jammy Dodgers sequence, which I think was quite a nice sequence, and I think was a really good little bit about Lister's attitude to Kochanski, where he admits that he wasn't good enough for her. That was a key little moment that we had to cut, which was a shame.
And what about seeing? Can he use a spare set of eyes? Hang him out of his neck hole.
I won the lottery. 18 months into deep space.
You gave it to me.
You do remember? Hey! Any luck?
Oh, they thought we were from some hidden camera show, sir. They just wouldn't take us seriously.
We even offered one of the... What? We even offered one... You should see what I did on the camera before I came on to do this scene.
When you take the piss, make sure you know your lines. I just mugged myself off in front of the whole company. Yeah, see? There he goes. I don't know, I'm never going to live this down, am I?
There was no time to play around, though, as the team undertook shooting of the climax of Back to Earth, a 2-day scene in the creator's mythic apartment.
No, a 2-day shoot for one scene it's got to be a record. We never did that. We did 2 minutes for one scene in the olden days.
The worry was, my God, it's like 12 minutes in the same set. Oh, is this going to work? There were a lot of, different parts to it. Everyone was pretty cheerful doing that because I think they could see the results were working and it looked gorgeous.
Yes, the creator's scenes in his house, in his castle, in his palace, whatever it may have been, it wasn't a set. It was a series of drapes, really, with various pieces of furniture. And I think the way it was lit, the way it sort of added to the surrealism of this situation of the cast coming in to meet their creator. Brilliantly played by Richard O'Callaghan.
I'll tell you, it's fantastic. I had met them before one time because I came up for a reading when they were putting together the movie script.
He came in and was Hoagie the Rogie in the very first Red Dwarf the movie screenplay, and he was so funny. And the cast absolutely loved what he did with that part. It's the opening scene of the movie. And he was just great. Completely different characters to the one he played in this.
They're very welcoming. There's no sort of superiority. They made you feel at home right from the start. Because it can be quite nerve-wracking coming in when you know a bunch of guys know all their stuff and you're kind of like the new boy. And they've done nothing but be supportive. They're great guys.
We did our dwarf interpretation of the creator look with the big dressing gown and the glasses. I mean, we did actually have quite sophisticated non-reflective lens glasses put in, but they just didn't have the comedy aspect. So we ended up with these great big welder's goggles.
The costume, very comfortable and warm. Everybody's going around this studio and I'm saying how freezing it is. I'm feeling okay. I've got sheepskin slippers on as well, so I'm feeling okay.
Personal favourite is the creator's bedroom, just because I enjoyed doing something that different in this setup, and probably because I was the most involved with that and just sort of choosing those things, trying to match the style of Blade Runner rather than actually copying the scene exactly. It's not even a set as such, it was just done out in a blackout space, so it's completely done from the dressing.
It's blackout curtains with more curtains and some choice objects. I mean, not only is there's a beautiful oriental rug on the floor, we went for 3 major objects. And one was this enormous bed. It's very similar to the bed of Ware, which is in the V&A. The other prop was a gorgeous 1930s typewriter, Imperial. Finally, a table with silver instead of gilt, and it's very, very rich. Tyrrell's bedroom, Blade Runner, is supposed to be based on an idea of what we think the Pope's bedroom would be like. So we've got the Pope's bedroom, we've got Tyrrell's bedroom from Blade Runner, and now we've got the creator from Red Dwarf. And so it's a distillation of a man who feels that he's got all of life's power.
That again was one that grew a little bit as well, and we had the chance of sort of suggested of going to the location to set it up first, which was just the old house in Shepperton, but that gives you a sort of grounding for it, and then when we go into that environment, it kind of becomes something more than it actually is.
Shoot on before. Why don't we just...
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Doors to the...
That robot wars now camera wars.
To create the Rimmer Munchkins, the production outfitted 2 children in scaled-down uniforms. The process was completed with Chris Barry swivelling in front of the ever-present green screen.
And action. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Come to a stop.
Chris's performance in that is so creepy. And if you look at his eyes, I think, and I haven't spoken to Chris about this, but I think Chris is doing an impression of the little boy who was the original body, which is why it looks so weird.
One shot that is an effect shot in the creator's bedroom scene is the vase sequence. And here we use what I like to refer to as classic magician stuff. It's misdirection. We use a real vase hung in the air and use a digital one that flies up to meet it. Because, of course, the audience doesn't see it as a visual effect shot until it freezes, at which point they start paying attention and going, does that vase look real? Well, of course, at that point it is a real vase. And so we've already done the gag with visual effects a few beats earlier.
This is brilliant. What's he doing?
You get to hop me stupid, sir. Hop me stupid.
I did have a little bit of protection. Not in the form of a cricket box, as one would have expected, but just sort of, I don't know what it was, really, several pairs of underpants rolled into a pad, but we don't really need to hear any more about that. Suffice to say, I survived, and my voice is still roughly the same level it was, and not like this.
Masterful. You're enjoying that far too much.
And that whole sequence in there is so complicated, and there were so many little set pieces in it, but that's what took a long time. Obviously, the rake handles being something that'll stay in my memory. I don't think it'll ever leave. I think it's been hammered into my memory, but such good fun to do. So utterly stupid. And also that thing of, you know, I was slightly anxious about that, and I said to Doug, look, when I tread on a garden rake, I can't really control the speed. And I did it, and luckily I had my arm in the way, and I've got the reinforced arm. It still hurt. Wow! If that had hit me in the face, even with a rubber mask, I think I may not be here now. So that was great to set that up and do that. And also the advantage we've had on here, which I'm sure we could have done in the past, but I don't remember ever seeing that, where we've got instant playback. And I think the nervousness before was you had to wind the tape back, and then if they forgot to wind it forward again at the end, you'd lose everything. So we just watched that back at the speed it was, you know, we speeded it up slightly instantly. You could do all that. It was just fantastic and very reassuring to see, oh yes, that does look like it. Because from where I was, it looked like there were 3 blokes lying on the floor hitting me with sticks, which is effectively what was going on.
The rakes thing has been a staple of vaudeville, Charlie Chaplin, Ben Turpin, for years and years. I mean, that's like one of the staple gags. And it wasn't me who wrote that gag. It was me Lister writing that gag. So the idea was it was Lister's sense of humour, which is a cartoon sense of humour. He was punishing Rimmer for being Rimmer, and he was punishing Crichton because subconsciously he knew about the Kochanski situation. He believed the kids, and he realised that Crichton, although he was trying to do his best and look after him, yet again had really messed things up for him.
Yeah, good.
The scene's audio effects were beefed up in the Foley sound studio. While the cast added their own flourishes back on the set.
There was some very interesting stuff we shot yesterday, which was reverse, filmed, which is shown in reverse, in fact. So we had things like flying out of our hand, looks like it's flying into my hand, and it's all. And we were able to watch it back, because of course the cameras they're using are absolutely extraordinary, amazing, and the playback is so fast. You can instantly watch back something that's gone on and say, no, oh, you took the hands out of shot there, so bring it, do it again, you do it again, and then you get the, and suddenly you see this extraordinary thing happen when it's played in reverse, and it looks like it's going as it should. And you think, how did they do that? How did I do that?
Of all the production's secrets, none was more closely guarded than the return of Chloe Annette as Kochanski. A fact that meant the actress had to lie to everyone around her.
Oh yes, but I'm so used to that. I'm so used to it. I'm very good at it too. No, I just don't. Yeah, it's how are you doing it to friends? Are you? I heard they're doing it. Are you doing? No, I'm not doing. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Never mind. It'll be something else.
Yeah, I mean, if it works, then fine. People will be surprised and hopefully delighted that Kochanski's back. But I don't know if it won't get out before it comes out. And if you're watching this after the event and it did get out, I told you so.
Oh, yes, that was about the one thing we managed to keep quiet. We did try really, really hard, though, to keep that quiet. And I have to say, a huge part of that was Chloe herself. She didn't come to the premiere. It was done all shot on a separate day away from everyone. And I mean, I just think the emotional impact of that, you know, it was really fantastic.
I think that will be one of the more memorable scenes of Back to Earth, particularly, of course, as it goes from high comedy to a very dramatic, really, scene between Lister and Kochanski at the end, which I thought they both played that very well. It's arguably some of the best Red Dwarf stuff, you know, we've shot.
When I saw the footage of her and Craig, it was like, God, it's a bit emotional. We were starting to well up. Me and Dan were sitting there together. It's just extraordinary.
Yeah, I mean, it's very hard because you don't want to build her up so there's a huge letdown when you come on. You know, if you talk about something so much and she becomes this amazing figure and then I come on, you know, it's, So you don't want to let people down.
You can have a lot of pathos. You can have very touching scenes alongside, you know, sort of comedy in that. Because I've been away acting sort of every day for the last 4 years, and I kind of feel as though I'm more at home. I'm more comfortable showing more emotions than just being gross out.
It's a very severe wig, but it's great to to wear all that outfit. Beautiful shoes, because they're mine, and they're very expensive, and they're lovely, and they're very, very high. Yeah, it's because the way Rachel walks in is very. She has got that sort of robot, sort of, but not, if you know what I mean. And because the skirt is a very tight pencil skirt, you can't help it. No, it's lovely. I love dressing up. Everybody loves dressing up.
It's an incarnation, it's a copy of what Lister believes Kochanski would be in that situation. So, sure, I mean, she's very kind of robotic and strange in a really good way.
She's almost a villain in those.
Oh no, she is the villain. She's the core of the drug. First of all, she's going, here I am, I can make you happy, but not in a physically convincing way at all. Because you don't trust her, you don't believe her. And then she becomes more emotional as he starts to go away and tries to get him back by winding him up. But then that fails too.
You'll never get me. I'm way out of your league.
No, I'm pretty cool. I don't take any smeg. And even though I'm disgusting, sometimes I can be quite brave.
You'll never get me.
Yeah. Will.